You ever wonder why you can drive from one state to another and boom, the laws just completely change? Or why some huge issues are decided way over in Washington, D.C., while others are handled right in your own state capital? Well, that's not random. It's all by design. It's a system called federalism. And believe it or not, it's kind of the invisible blueprint that shapes a ton of American life. So let's dive right in with a real-world puzzle that gets to the absolute heart of this. How is it possible for something to be perfectly legal where you live, but at the same time, it's still technically a federal crime? And this isn't just some textbook question, it's a real-life contradiction playing out right now, and the answer is all about understanding federalism. At its very core, federalism is all about one thing: sharing power. It's the big idea in the US that says, hey, we're not going to have one single all-powerful government making every single rule. Instead, that power is split. It's divided between the national government in DC and all the individual state governments. Think of it as two levels of government, both working at the very same time. So how is this power actually divided? Well, the US Constitution basically draws a line in the sand. It gives the federal government a specific list of powers. We call them enumerated powers. Things like printing money or regulating business between the states. Then you've got the 10th Amendment, which says, okay, any power that we didn't give to the federal government, that's reserved for the states. Now, this chart shows a nice, clean 50-50 split, just to make it simple, but in reality, the actual balance of that power has been a massive debate pretty much since the country was founded. All right, so we have this great power divide, but what does that actually look like in the real world? Who's in charge of what? This split creates these really distinct lanes of responsibility that shape, well, everything from the roads we drive on to the schools our kids go to. And you see this practical split everywhere. Take criminal law, for instance. The federal government goes after big picture stuff like tax evasion. But most of the crimes you hear about, like theft, that falls under state law. It's the same deal with commerce. If you're shipping goods across state lines, that's a federal issue. But a local business, that's regulated by the state. You can see this careful balancing act across so many parts of our lives, from civil rights all the way to education. But what happens when these two levels of government just don't see eye to eye? What happens when a state passes a law that seems to fly right in the face of a federal one? This is where federalism gets really, really interesting, and sometimes pretty heated. So let's go right back to our marijuana puzzle. On one side, you have states saying, you know what, this can be legal for recreational or medical use. But on the other side, you have federal law, which still classifies it as a totally illegal substance. It's a direct conflict. You've got two valid laws, one from the state and one from the federal government, and they're saying the exact opposite thing. This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? When state and federal laws go head-to-head in a direct conflict, which one actually comes out on top? Well, the answer is hiding in plain sight, written right into the Constitution, and it's the ultimate tiebreaker. It's called the Supremacy Clause. And it's pretty much what it sounds like. When a state law is in direct conflict with a federal law, the federal law wins. It establishes a clear hierarchy. Now, this doesn't just wipe out state power, not at all, but it makes sure that states can't pass laws that contradict what the Constitution calls the supreme law of the land. Okay, but it's not always a clean fight or a simple division of labor. In a lot of areas, the federal and state governments both have a hand in making the rules. So, welcome to the overlap zone, where things get even more complicated. In this overlap zone, there are two key ideas you gotta know: concurrent powers and preemption. Concurrent just means at the same time. So, for example, both the federal and state governments can tax you. That's a concurrent power. Preemption is a bit different. That's when the federal government basically steps in and says, you know what, we're handling this one exclusively, which pretty much stops states from making their own laws in that specific area. I know this can all sound like some high-level abstract legal theory, but the reality is that this constant balancing act between the state and federal government shapes almost every single part of your day. Just think about it for a second. The speed limit you have to follow on your way to work? That's a state law. The standards at your local public school? Largely set by the state. But those big, sweeping healthcare policies, or the rules that govern the internet, those usually have a heavy dose of federal regulation involved. This constant back and forth is all around us. And you know, this system wasn't some kind of accident. It was designed to be flexible. By reserving a whole bunch of powers for the states, the founders created a framework that could change and adapt over time. It lets different states act as laboratories of democracy, which is just a cool way of saying they can test out new ideas and policies on a smaller scale before maybe, just maybe, being adopted by the whole country.
So the big takeaway here is that federalism isn't some settled, static thing. It's a constant, living negotiation over power. As we face brand new challenges, things like climate change, artificial intelligence, global health crises, the question of who should take the lead, the states or the federal government, is only going to get more and more critical. And that ongoing debate, right there, that is the very essence of federalism.